Hello and welcome to the Phil Talk Sports Podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest in the world of sports. Whether you're watching on YouTube or following along on your favorite podcast app, thanks for clicking on and thanks for being here with us. On today's episode, the NBA is back. Finally, we've been at a week in here, and I'm joined by my California correspondent, Nick Rice. Nick, I know how much you love the NBA. You've got to be loving life right now.
I mean, I'm not having a game on the side of the computer screen right now. I mean, we have Phil Nunziata giving you what he thinks, but also giving you some attention to Orlando is playing right now. So I love the NBA, but you love it. We all love it. It's back, and life is for a little bit back to normal.
I mean, it just so happened that we planned to do this podcast right when Orlando was tipping off. So, why not put the game on the other TV, right? I mean, it just seems like an obvious thing for me.
Of course, yeah.
So we're about a week. I think this is 6 days. By the time this comes out, it'll be a week's worth. Let's start with the very basics. The first impressions you got of the presentation, I feel what they really did was they made it less of a sporting event and more of a television product, because right now that's the only audience they need to address. So I've been overwhelmingly impressed with how the presentation looks, and I'm not saying I don't miss the fans, but I don't miss them nearly as much as I thought I would, at least early on. Maybe in the playoffs, it's going to feel a little different. But in a way, these are playoff games already. So, the atmosphere is still the level that I would expect. And I've just hats off to them that I've really liked the presentation so far.
Oh, yeah, same here. Two things. First, when you said that atmosphere only addressing television, I would love to see the video of a court shot with the audio of a team winning a championship and hearing the 10 people clapping for it. I just find that to be awesome. And then secondly, we'll get to it later, but I do believe that this condensed season, along with the extended rest, I mean, it seems from the start through about a week of the NBA play that it actually made more of a significant impact than I thought. I really think that some of these teams have completely looked different now versus before. And then in terms of the environment that I'm struggling to figure out how they do a better job with this. Everything from containing the virus to the aesthetics of it, I think they did exceptional. And the NBA should be applauded for the work that they have done in saving this season and saving a lot of us, a lot of sports fans.
Yeah, and, not only were they able to make the product, watchable and entertaining, but the other side of that coin was a lot of them were worried about the social justice issues, being able to participate and making a stand in that. Not that me or you are qualified to talk about social justice issues, but the fact that they were able to make that known, whether it be, pregame, the Black Lives Matter shirt, like you said, there's no way they could have done this any better. Everyone that wanted something, I think, got it at the end of the day. And I think the presentation, it took me 2 games to realize it. I think they're going off of 2K. A lot of these extra camera angles remind me a lot of when you play 2K, and that could be, where this was able to come from.
Yeah, one thing I always was I was confused why the NBA didn't adopt this is the March Madness and National Championship sideline moving camera. They had the camera from one set baseline to the other, and it would follow whenever there's a transition or whenever there'd just be a slow walk up the court. I found that to be the best camera angle, and I believe that they are beginning to address that. And this is a great opportunity, I think the NBA is realizing, to add those extra things they wouldn't otherwise, to give fans a closer feeling. We'll also address this later. I'm doing a whole lot of foreshadowing, but there was a recent football league that unfortunately took the brunt of this COVID epidemic. But in the process, there were certain things they discovered that the NFL is not doing, like access to player interviews during the game. And same thing with the NBA and how they're having all this extra audio, and you get a closer feel than you do before about the player experience and about being there without being there, that I think at the end of this, they will start to adopt in future NBA games. I think it's great.
Yeah, and me and you have both worked in basketball games, whether it be, college or junior college or whatever, where the crowd is not, huge, we'll say that. And, the loudest people are the bench, trying to cheer on the guys or girls on the floor. And it really brings me back to that. And I think you also see like the team chemistry, because some teams have benches that are like going crazy and others are, just a clap here and there. And granted, everyone is a little different. Just because you're not loud doesn't mean like the team isn't cohesive or anything. But like for someone like me or you, I think we're used to it. And I think other people are getting used to the loudest thing you hear is the bench players.
Oh, I mean, when we, covering college basketball, with how fast the pace is back and forth, and of course the bench noise, to be honest, I think that it's every bit as good as hearing 20,000, rise to their feet during a big dunk. So I think even, I would say if there's any criticism I have is that they don't have enough of that, the NBA. There's too much, in my opinion, crowd noise that kind of dulls the emotion of the players. But of course, this gives fans an opportunity to hear that, to hear the bench reaction, the coach reaction, to hear some of the player instructions. And it almost feels like you're one of the players on the bench during those moments. I think it's great. And if there's somehow with 20,000 back in stadiums, they can integrate some of that. If you could get a feeling of what the coaches and players are saying in real time, if they could pull that off somehow, I mean, I think that would be huge, because we're learning right now that, I mean, it definitely isn't a detriment to hear those particular things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously their biggest concern with us hearing the players would be the swearing, being on, TNT, being on these bigger networks. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm sure we've had a slip here and there. I think there's, the average TV delay is like a minute. I think they pushed it back to 3 minutes, so like to counteract this. And I think it's been fine. Like, again, we've probably heard a slip or two, but overall, I think it's been fine. And I agree. Like, I think we enjoy the access to the players a little more. And you said, it's like being on the bench. And I agree. It's kind of like everybody gets that courtside experience now, because you hear everything. We were worried, like, are we just going to hear like the squeaking of sneakers and, the ball bouncing? Like, because that'd get very dry and very boring very easily.
Yeah.
But that's clearly not how it's worked so far. And I think, again, their biggest concern with that was the swearing. And I think the fact that we hear the other banter and we don't hear the swearing, because that's obviously what they'd be worried about. It's been great. And I think, do you think they find another gear with this? Like, do they have tricks up their sleeve for the playoffs, or do you think this is already the presentation we're running with? Do you think they're going to get, like to make it seem more important, do you think they're going to add anything else in a couple weeks?
I noticed from scrimmage games to regular season games, they added text, like artificial text, at the back end of the baseline. Like when Milwaukee plays, you'll see the green, Milwaukee Bucks logo name on one end, and then whoever they're playing on the other end. And I think out of that for the playoffs, because this is like an unprecedented situation and an opportunity for them to really debut some things, for the first time, I'd say ever. They've already experimented so many different new ideas. So why not add a couple extra? I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, and also the biggest thing that I've seen, because as I'm watching games, I'm like, there's something more free about the game right now. And I think what I've come out with is behind the baskets especially, but even on the sideline, because there's no fans, I find that guys are like diving for loose balls more, because they're not worrying about taking out a small family, like when they go for it. So like those behind the baskets just being empty, it gives it more of a Olympic vibe, because a lot of when they do like the FIBA World Championships, there doesn't tend to be fans behind the baskets, just the benches.
Yeah.
So maybe, I'm a little familiar with it that way, but I feel like the guys feel more free, that they don't have to worry about, bumping into people on the sideline, because it's not till you go to an NBA game that you realize how close those courtside fans are to the action. Like, we've seen Russell Westbrook get involved with fans and stuff in the past. Like, I think they just feel a little more like the pressure's off a little bit, not having to worry about, the people around.
Yeah. I wonder if they'll be able to pull that off. I mean, those are some expensive courtside seats. People are willing to take that risk. They're happy to take that risk. I'm not going to get any closer to being with an athlete than having an athlete come tackle me. So
right.
I think that I wonder if they would, but I'm with you. I wonder if they would do that, but I think that'd be pretty neat if there's a little more space and a little bit more of that sort of action too.
Yeah, I'm not saying they'll ever get rid of those seats, but pushing them back a couple feet in the future might make a world of difference, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Oh,
so it's been several months since we've had, we've talked like analytics, we've talked like concepts on how sports are going to work, and now they're back, and now we get to talk about some games, which I think we
I
can all
know.
do. Yeah, so I think one of the first things, let's talk about reopening day, we'll call it, with the NBA. There was the two games. There was the Pelicans game, and then there was the battle for LA. We'll get to that one in a minute, but I think the first big storyline to come out of this is Zion Williamson's minutes restriction and how they've lost 2 of their 3 games so far. And a lot of people point to that. Like, if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to say it's because of Zion. Obviously, the game, they kind of let him flow a little more. He scores 20 plus and they win. Whereas that first game, they lost by a possession and they took him out the last 3 minutes because he reached his minute cap. So, like, to me, there's common sense. Like, yeah, you're going to play 19 minutes, but if there's 1 more minute left in the game, like, let him do that, you know?
You're within one. I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, people have looked at it both ways, but, like, do you think they're obviously more concerned with his health than making the playoffs this year, which might not be a terrible thing, but that is where we're at with that. How do you think this is he already getting frustrated with the management in New Orleans?
Oh, I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. Sitting alone in the fourth quarter, you 2 full social distance seats, which is like a mile away from your teammates. I'd say he's probably a little frustrated. But I'm going to beware everyone listening, watching, that I'm about to be of the major minority. If of course I am reading people's reactions and opinions like I think are accurate. I don't think it's easy to poke at New Orleans. It's been a joke. They just got rid of Anthony Davis. They're in another semi-rebuild, even though future for them. So it's very easy to look at a team that hasn't competed for a world championship. If I'm not mistaken, they haven't come close ever. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but they haven't even gone as far as maybe the Clippers have gone and whatnot. So easy to poke at them, but I think that these are NBA personnel, NBA professionals in the medical field. This is NBA coaching staffs that are dealing with Zion Williamson. I don't think they're all here. I think there's a reason why he's only playing the minutes that he's playing, and I think it's because there is something with playing. Charles Barkley could tell you about, Shaquille O'Neal could tell you about, that is overwhelmingly taxing on your knees. I'm not even 25, and going on a jog the other day, he started to hurt, and I'm half his weight. So it is significant, and I think that they're slowly catching him up to speed, but I believe that this is going to be an issue throughout most of his career. It was the problem before the draft with him blowing out a tire against North Carolina, that big game that it actually sold more than some NBA playoff games. That was just how much attention that was brought onto that. But I think that this is a huge issue that will follow him for a while, because when you have 4 months off and only play 16 minutes in your first game back, I think this is something more than just catching him up to speed. There's something wrong with him right now health-wise. Just my thoughts. Not that I'm that close with the situation.
Yeah, I mean, really, I feel like the guy can't win. Like, everybody was like, oh, he's going to come back to this thing out of shape. And then we saw the gym picture where he looks like Dave Bautista, basically.
Oh, yeah.
And, so he silenced those critics. And then he comes back. And maybe it was just to dip in, because it's really been the first 2 games. His third game that he's played so far, I think he had 28 minutes or something like that, had 25 points. So maybe they're going to give him a little more leash. And I'm fine with the minutes restriction, but you got to let your best guy play late. Like, play him a little less in the first and give me Zion in the second half, because that's when games are won. We've seen so many games, college or pro. Even this week we've seen games, up 12, down 8, up 6, winning by 4. Like, it jumps around. This game of basketball is a game of run, really. It's just how well that's able to go. So I think it's a matter of using – if you want to keep the minutes on him, fine, but make it be the minutes that count. Like, if that means he doesn't start the game, God forbid, like, that'll cause a little bit of an uproar. Unless he starts and the first time out, you take him out. But I think the minutes that he plays are more important than the amount as long as you put him in at the right times.
Yeah, I think Utah breathing sigh of relief with 8 minutes to go in the game, knowing that Zion wouldn't return in that bubble opener. I think that was a sign that the media and the fans are thinking alike. Like this, I don't think this was exactly minutes-wise handled exactly right, but I'm with you. I'm just speaking to the conflict that people have about whether he should play more. I think he's averaging about 20 minutes a game. But then again, I mean, Kawhi is only averaging about 30, and he has been notorious over this year having issues with his knees. And I think, unfortunately, some players just deal with these nagging ailments, and I think Zion is one of those people. If he was a normal weight, then you tag along how explosive he is and how big he is, and it's significant for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can be too careful because, like, no disrespect for New Orleans, the Pelicans, or anything. I don't think they even think that they make a run at this title this year. So if they miss the playoffs, it's not the end of the world. It's not like some of these other teams missing the playoffs. So as I think I said it already earlier, they're much more concerned with his health than they are making the playoffs, and that's probably a good call anyway. So that same night, again, that awesome doubleheader that we had, later on in the night, we had the Battle of LA, Clippers-Lakers, and it reminded me a lot of like the opening third of an Avengers movie because you get that big battle, but you know it's not the last one. You know there's one coming at the end of the movie, and we, of course, hope that these teams get a full series together in the playoffs. But, you know, LeBron makes the winning shot, and, like, being not a LeBron guy doesn't mean I don't see how awesome it was for the NBA to be back and him to make that shot, and it's like the defiant, like, we're back, there's games and everything. So not so much that they won, because even if the Clippers won, as I said, there's a later battle to be made. Since then, the Lakers have clinched the number one seed. And the difference with the seeding this year is we're not as much worried about home court advantage, obviously, because there is none. And there frankly wouldn't be for these teams anyway, because they share the same stadium. But do you think there's any plus for the Lakers to be the number one seed when they run to the Clippers, hopefully down the line again?
Full disclosure, I'm a Laker guy. I'm biased, all right? Just right off the bat, I got to let people know.
Yeah, sure.
There's obviously less of an advantage being in a neutral site with no fans. But I do think, you know, in some weird way, seeing Kawhi late in that game miss a couple free throws, that having that crowd with the virtual fans, which I think is cool. I think that's something that other leagues can implement for sure. The MLB did the cardboard cutout thing. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think you could add more realism. But anyways, having the fans wave, throw up some towels, I think that it may have created one missed shot. But outside of that, I think this is neutral site, equal advantage to both teams, which, of course, helps the Clippers in the long run and some of the teams that just make the playoffs, the bottom half of the seeds. But I do believe that the advantages that are gained are not going to be visually, but they're going to be mentally over the long run. And it's going to be by way of chemistry too. And we've already noticed that. I mean, you know, we didn't address it before, but, you know, Lou Williams of the Clippers has his situation in the bubble and getting the type of flack that he gets. And that has to take a hit under the team chemistry. And then there's other teams that we will address in a moment, but it seems that the layoff and the short regular season has really helped them to get fresh. And also, you know, it plays right into the type of game that they play.
Yeah, people have kind of tried to look at it from both ways. They say the shortened season helps veteran teams because they get to play less. And then you've had other people that say it actually favors the younger teams because they're still, you know, the fresh legs, and it's more of a sprint than a marathon now. We haven't quite figured out which one is right. I think we'll obviously know in another month or so. But it can go both ways, and you just touched on it there. In this new format, because we're no longer truly asking who was the best team this year. We're asking, given the circumstances, who does it benefit the most to win a title? So right now, it's only been a week, obviously, but by now we've seen every team play 2 to 3 times, depending. What team jumps out at you? Not necessarily the best team, but that is, given the circumstance, maybe even has a better shot than they did before all this went down.
Well, let's take a look at the teams that are undefeated right now. Toronto, Indiana, Orlando out of the East, Houston out of the West. And I think we can all agree. Oh, Phoenix. Phoenix.
All right. Go Suns.
All right. Well, until I mentioned Phoenix, even Phoenix, I think there's one thing in common, and I noticed it in the first half of that first game, not New Orleans, and I noticed that in the New Orleans-Utah game. The teams that are high on the shooting percentage list in the NBA, it seems that they have adjusted far quicker. 1 through 3 games, the one dynamic of the Lakers that has become glaring to me is they have taken a significant dip in three-point percentage. And I think the teams that are good shooting teams, Toronto's a terrific shooting team. That's why they're second to the NBA. Orlando, I think you can speak on that. I believe that they're pretty solid in shooting the 3 ball. I don't think there's any better shooting team than Houston right now, and they're undefeated in this bubble. So I think the shooting teams, we're still debating on whether young or old or veteran or experienced or whatever chemistry. I think shooting definitely is early on. It shows the teams that shoot well are playing well right now. Teams that are winless, Washington and Memphis. I wouldn't mistake them for being lights out shooting clubs either.
Right. And I would not be shocked if the statement of winless teams still has Washington on it when this whole bubble's over, because they have basically had to bring a G League team into Orlando due to John Wall not playing, Bradley Beal, and all that. And you mentioned the Magic, 2-0 so far, playing the also undefeated Pacers as we record this, not looking great. But the reason for that, obviously, one of the bigger injuries so far, we're used to dealing with COVID health right now. As far as just a physical injury, is Jonathan Isaac, leg injury. They thought it was a broken leg initially. I think it's an ACL or MCL. Chances are, he's done for a good while. Obviously, he was the talk of some, not controversy, but definitely some attention given standing for the anthem as opposed to kneeling for it, which if you said that a year ago, you'd be surprised where we are today. But So that obviously makes the Magic take a hit. They're in a situation in the East where the only team that could take their spot is Washington. And as we stated, that's probably not going to happen. So it's really just a matter of who's going to be 7 and who's going to be 8 out of Brooklyn and Orlando. But those are basically set, whereas the West is a little more wide open.
Right. If that Orlando score goes final, Orlando would be 8 by a game. Brooklyn would be 7. And Brooklyn's been playing well, but of course they got a G League team out there right now with an entire starting lineup of players hurt. Mm-hmm. On top of Kyrie and Kevin Durant, who wouldn't even be part of that list. Yeah. But yeah, looking at this, it's amazing going into this that more players have been sidelined with COVID, been sidelined with injury than actually with COVID. And both of those numbers are incredibly low. That was the one storyline going into the tournament as to whether or not players would get hurt. And you've watched several NHL games, and I've been periodically peaking with the MLB. Mm-hmm. I think that injury, at least for this startup for all these leagues, WNBA as well. Of course, Sabrina Ionescu, who's a major storyline going into the WNBA, but she is one of the very, very select few players that got hurt coming back from 4 months off, and I think that's terrific.
Yeah, and like I said, the main one obviously so far has been Jonathan Isaac, and we hope to keep that number very low moving forward as we I know we've just started this, but really this round of the tournament, if you will, isn't going to last much longer. We're 3 games into an 8-game season, or 7 or 8 games, or whatever it might be. But so as we approach the midway point already, you could say, of this play-in scenario, already only a week in, what team do you think it benefits the most? Because for me, you already mentioned how good they've been shooting. Houston just seems to get it. I don't know if it's because they just play 100 miles an hour and it is a sprint now and not a marathon, but they seem to be, if I had to pick a team that's adjusted to everything the quickest, I would go with the Rockets so far.
And which is insane considering what they did at the trading deadline and how many people hopped off of that bandwagon as quickly as they did. But I'm going with another team that is also undefeated, shooting well, playing as a very cohesive unit. But without Kawhi and Danny Green, very few could imagine that Toronto, the defending champions, would look as good as they did. The Lakers' lone loss was a pretty big one by 14 to Toronto. The Raptors look like a team that has used the 4-month layoff to their advantage I don't know what they did, but Nick Nurse has got this team playing even better basketball right now than they did when they came in ranked second. By all accounts, unless Milwaukee goes on another losing streak, they've lost 2 straight, which is baffling to me. Toronto will be the 2 seed. They pretty much locked that up over Boston, who's 4 games behind them. So Toronto would either play Orlando or Brooklyn. That's a good first matchup. But Toronto, it seems, no matter who they play, they have the sort of defensive makeup that they could cover pretty much anybody. And I think we've seen that playing Milwaukee as tough as they have this year.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said. I think a lot of people thought that the Toronto situation was almost going to be the way Cleveland is both times that LeBron has left, where they just kind of fizzle into obscurity. And the fact that not only have they not done that, but you can make the argument that they're playing even better than they did last year. People forget that they're defending champs because the guy that was responsible for that has since moved on. But to be the number 2 seed, and you got to think even the year before Kawhi, they were the number 1 seed going into the playoffs. So, like, this is a team that has put together a good amount of success in recent years with and without their superstar. And you already mentioned Milwaukee. There's a lot of people that are thinking, as far as Giannis goes, I don't know if he has one more year before he's a free agent, but a lot of people are saying that this is Milwaukee's time. Like, this is a go for broke situation with them as far as keeping Giannis in Milwaukee. People have, discussed like, oh, he's fine being there. He's not really chasing like the big lights of a big market. We don't necessarily know that for sure, but do you think this is like a make or break for Milwaukee to at least maybe make the finals or at least the conference finals?
I mean, regardless of how adamant he talks that Giannis is going to stay, I don't think he knows for sure. Every time Milwaukee loses a game where he scores 38 points with 12 rebounds, I think that, a little bit of doubt creeps up in his head. And who wouldn't? Seeing how great he is and considering Milwaukee can only be so good. I mean, looking at that roster the other day, I noticed they're even older than I thought. Guys that somehow are still making plays in the NBA, like Kyle Korver and George Hill, are in their mid to late 30s. So it's amazing to me. But in terms of Milwaukee's window, considering how great the Lakers and Clippers seem to be for the next year or two out of the West, and even from the East, the threat of Boston, I think, is significant for the immediate future. And Toronto, if they continue to progress with Pascal Siakam like they have, I think this is a very significant season. But I believe that Giannis, his decision will come down to whether they win the title any of the next 2 years. If they win it next season, I think all of any sort of playoff failures he may suffer this season, if he has, would be forgotten about.
Yeah, I do think then that really just makes the question that, why this might not be the last year. The clock has started, the countdown clock, because like you said, he basically has to win it in this contract to prove that it can be done. And I think if he wins one, he would stay there for life. Like you said, even if it happens next year, I think if he does it and it proves that he can make it done, him and, Chris Middleton is very much the Robin to his Batman at this point. Proving that he can be a number 2 superstar, plenty of stuff for him to prove too. So I agree. I think if he gets it done in any of the next 2 years, that would be enough for him to stay in Milwaukee. But if it doesn't, I think that's the way people are saying that he might move on if it doesn't happen in this season or next.
Right. I mean, full disclosure, I think Toronto winds up winning the East. But Milwaukee, I think, will take him right to the brink. I just believe that the Bucks The way that they're constructed is great to win a lot of regular season games. We saw it last year with the one company took care of them in the playoffs. I think that this is the sort of team that unfortunately is just not good enough around Giannis. But I stand to be corrected. I really do believe that Giannis will stay. But I think there is that thought in his head that he doesn't even know yet. Even though he says he does, he doesn't know yet.
I don't think the decision's made in his head or the organization. I don't think they are, convinced he's staying or going one way or the other. And this is definitely a different scenario. This isn't like the Dwight Howard situation or, Carmelo leaving Denver. Like, this is a very business-oriented move. I don't think – like, there will be no jerseys burned if he leaves Milwaukee, I don't think. It's possible. No. It happens most places these days. But I do think it'll be a more, relaxed movement. So you mentioned there that your pick to win the East at this point in time is Toronto. So who would you pick in the West with that matchup?
I think Toronto plays Los Angeles.
Yeah. Way to go out on a limb there.
Like, come on, man. The Lakers. Yeah, I think the Lakers play them. I think that's going to be an amazing Western Conference Finals. I think it's going to be amazing Eastern Conference. I think it goes chalk to get to the conference titles. But I wouldn't put Houston out of the possibility of getting to the West. But I just believe that the Lakers are too overwhelming, and I think Toronto is just too well oiled. I think after this year, the Raptors probably it's hard to say what they do in free agency, but I think this is their time. Yeah. Because you see too often in sports with a team that isn't the most talented in a league, they can have these moments of catching fire. But I think in the long run, I don't think this formula can work for them. But I think this year Toronto knocks them out because they just have so much chemistry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they might be the best. Like you said, chemistry-wise, and it's crazy the fact that you can lose a superstar and, frankly, not miss a beat. I mean, we talked about how they were successful even before he got there. So, yeah, they're very viable as a finals, either winner or at least participant. The Boston, some people like, and there's even people, if Philadelphia is able to figure it out in this truncated situation, they could be a dark horse for some people, obviously. But I do like how wide open it is. I mean, after, 4 years of Warriors Cavs in a row, I'm glad that we don't already know who the winners are going to be and who's going to make it to the finals. So as basketball fans, I just enjoy the uncertainty of it all at this point.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that is probably the most significant drawback to the NBA versus the NFL, and why I think viewership has moved towards the NBA. Based off of what I'm hearing, more people are moving that way than moving the other way for those that choose between one or the other because of that very situation. It's just too hard to watch 82 regular season games. It's brutal enough to consider how much longer an NBA season is than pretty much every other major sports league in terms of duration on a calendar. So to see this is great. And I think this is the beginning of several years of parity in the NBA, which almost doesn't even make sense coming out of my mouth. But in the conversation, Toronto in the conversation is like in the NFL what you see almost every year, where there's a new team that had never had much playoff success that's in the running right now. And I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, even you look in the West has always been a little more, clumped up at the top than the East has been. But even if you pick the two LA teams as your 1 and 2, the gap from 3, 4, and 5, and even 6, like it's nowhere near as wide as it used to be. So
2.5 games.
Yeah, so
2.5 with 6 to go.
Right. So even the top heaviness of that conference has slimmed out a little bit. So this has been. We knew going into, I think yesterday, that this was going to be a basketball-heavy podcast, but a football headline has snuck in there that we definitely need to bring up here as we close out the show. The XFL, you cannot kill it. It is back for a third time, at least in theory, because it's been purchased by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson actor and former WWE champion, with his media group. It's really, it sounds like a practical joke. It's almost the whole The Rock running for president thing, but it is a reality as of right now. I don't know. We really know nothing besides that fact. But the fact that the XFL will get another shot, I'm happy for. Because truthfully, they were doing everything right a couple months back. Like, this is not like the first time. They did not run out of money. They were doing great. The ratings were great. They were either making a profit or deadly close to it halfway through their first season, which is unheard of. They made more money their kickoff weekend than the AAF did their entire season. So that,
Wow, I did
as
not
a
know that.
comparison, and there's been talks that they wanted to put teams in Phoenix and Chicago and move the Tampa team to Orlando for a slightly bigger football market in that sense. So there was plans in the works. Video game talks was already being dealt with. So with all that, this was really moving, and it really hurt that it had to be killed by something non-sports or business or even football related. So for them to get another shot, I think they deserve it as a unit. A lot of players I've literally seen a player tweet The Rock, "Hey man, can I get my job back?" Like they are ready to, get back to practice at this rate. I think it's proven that the spring football craze is real and people do want it, and it would be great for this to come back and actually stay for a while.
And, if everything goes according to plan, hopefully this spring could be an opportunity for them to, of course we don't know when they would debut it, but it would be an opportunity for them. Who was the first owner of the XFL before they canceled? It was like a decade or two ago.
Well, it originally was Vince McMahon the first time, along with Dick Ebersol of NBC, were partners. And then this second iteration was about 90% Vince McMahon and Titan Sports.
Yeah, I'm wondering when a strictly football guy is going to come in from one of these. But regardless, I'm sure he has plenty of football guys talking to him. I think that this is amazing. I think spring football there's definitely a market for it. I did not know how successful the XFL was the first time. But the fact that their first season gets canceled and they're ready to return speaks volumes to the fact that it could absolutely work. And I think based off of what I'm seeing and reading, major sports experts are talking about it too. I mean, the MLB is losing a fan base. In fact, we haven't addressed it, but they may even lose a season this year because of just how coronavirus has ravaged the entirety of several organizations, it seems. I think that there is a market there for spring football, and it seems pretty untapped right now. It may become more tapped if the NBA delays not just this coming year, but future years to December starting date. But still, I think that there's plenty of diet for spring football.
Yeah, you mentioned Major League Baseball right now. The only reason I haven't really brought it up is it's like a fly by night, like day by day things are changing, and I would rather talk about the whole story than just step by step, because obviously the Miami Marlins have been the butt of the joke. They were the first outbreak. There's been a smaller one in St. Louis. It cost my Phillies about a week's worth of games having to sit home. They're finally back to losing games right now, but at least they're on the field. But no, I do think. And I don't think it would even be out of the question if the XFL wanted to do something this coming spring, depending on the climate of the world. I mean, look at all these sports that are thriving. They're in bubbles, and the one that's participating right now that isn't in a bubble is the one with all the issues. So I would not be shocked if the XFL had to explore, like, hey, if we want to come back for this year, for 2021, we're going to have to look at the bubble situation. And with only 8 teams in the whole league, I think it's doable. Like, whether you do it out in Phoenix, you do it in Orlando, because basketball won't be playing and baseball won't be, or soccer, won't be playing. So there would be the room in Orlando. I think they would have to look at the bubble situation. And I think a lot of these players, people talked about, would you, quarantine from your family for the 2 or 3 months of the season? I think XFL players would for a 10-game season, and just to put the league really rolling to then the next year you can go back to maybe 2022, have a more traditional format like we were seeing early this year. So I think the NFL in the bubble, I think as much as it would be helpful, I don't think it's kind of out of the question, because there's too many teams, too many players, too many office members. But when you take a 32-team league and bring it down to an 8-team league, I do think it's a possibility that bubble football could exist for the XFL.
And this is an opportunity for them to start later than the other professional leagues, which gives them more runway to cheaper testing, to potential vaccines by that point for the players. So there's that extra pitch that you can give to them. If you have quarter-filled stadiums, there is a real opportunity there for them to be the first league that provides fans. And you're not shoving too many away. I mean, even during XFL's awesome inaugural year this season, they weren't filling the stadiums. But, you wouldn't be taking away too many fans from coming there. And they bring them an opportunity to say, hey, this year you haven't been able to see NFL games. Because based off of what I'm seeing, only a couple of teams are even willing to have partially open stadiums, but right. I may be wrong on that. I haven't researched too much on it.
It really is a state-by-state basis right now, so we don't know about that. But yeah,
the XFL could offer that, partially filled stadiums.
I mean, the XFL this past season that didn't finish was averaging between 17,000 to 20,000 fans, which in your average NFL caliber stadium, that's anywhere from 25 to 30% capacity anyway. You would obviously then take that 17,000 and spread it out as opposed to putting everybody on the lower bowl, obviously. But I think it's doable. And obviously I think this came out yesterday morning. I guess it would have been Monday morning that this news came out with The Rock and his media group and his business partners. Real quick before we wrap up, I did want to throw out there, you mentioned hopefully they get football people involved. While football is not the first thing you think of when you think of The Rock, you do have to remember this is a guy that played at University of Miami. He did play in the CFL. He does have more football background than people might realize. I do think he's smart enough to go out and get the football people to help him in the situations that he doesn't know. But it's not a total – it's not like Vince McMahon starting a football league with no prior connection aside from going to was it Eastern Carolina and probably attending a couple football games back in the 70s. That was probably his only connection to football at the time. But I do think The Rock is again, I think he's a good leader, and if he's smart enough to find the people needed to make this work, I think it has a really good shot. Because again, this is a league that did not fail for any reason. Anything short of a global pandemic, it would have been a successful year for the XFL.
Yep. Man, I think based off of your exceptional research and that exclamation point, that sounds like a pretty good closing argument right there about the XFL. I love it.
And I would like to make it known, everyone knows on this channel, we also have wrestling podcasts, and I talk a lot of wrestling on other shows. I'm actually not a big fan of The Rock as far as a wrestler goes. I can only pick a handful of movies of his that I could say I enjoyed. So this is not me with rose-tinted glasses for being a fan of him as in any line of work or whatever. He's definitely not up there for me. So I'm really trying to look at it pretty straight and narrow down the line here. And I do think, it's got a shot. And hopefully in a couple weeks when we come back, we might hear a little more about the XFL because they have to keep the momentum going. They got to give us something. They got to let us know that they're working on things, even if they just let you know, not we got a season starting in April, be ready. But if they let them know that they didn't just buy it to sit on it until the world, until the COVID situation ends. They need to be actively working on things. Even if it doesn't happen next year, at least set that as a goal. At least have the attempt of trying to play next year.
Since you're given these powerful swings, these home run shots of all this exceptional knowledge and research that I do not have right now, I'd like to ask you what you think the XFL, if at all, could do to improve upon its fan base, attention for this coming year. And the first thing I think about is bringing in a guy like Colin Kaepernick, who is a household name and would bring a whole lot of eyeballs to this.
In a bubble, yes, I think if they're able to get a big star, I mean, there was jokes about Andrew Luck obviously playing because his dad was the former. I don't think he will be involved in this iteration, but he was the commissioner of the XFL at the time. So there was talks of Andrew Luck. I think with Colin Kaepernick, he was I think every player gets paid the same in the XFL, and he wanted it was like a Dr. Evil moment. He wanted like $2 million or something to play in the league. And, maybe something like that could help. Really, I think what it takes is you had a decent amount of fans, and really, like, what makes you like a sports team? The fact that you build up memories and longevity with the team. So even, let's say, the best team last year was the Houston Roughnecks, and they had a great following, and, Philip Walker was easily the MVP, got signed by the Panthers. But if you get 3, 4, 5, 6 years of Roughneck football, that's how you get a fan base, I think. Like, it's hard to – any expansion team in any area, if you've ever like, oh, I got a new minor league baseball team in my area, I'll go check it out. But it's the years after years and the season after season that builds up that fan base. So really, to answer your question, the thing that the XFL needs is longevity. I think you get 2, 3 solid years in a row, and you're going to see everything rise.
I stand corrected. I stand corrected because college football has shown that, covering what we cover, smaller colleges and whatnot. I'm surprised to see that comes out to junior college football games, that comes out to lower level, bottom level Division I basketball games. The fan bases where they fill the seats and they're into it, almost maybe more into it than NFL. That some stadiums I've been to seems a little more casual. I think that's a very good point.
Yep. I think that on that note, then we'll probably wrap this one up. Nick, go ahead and let us know where we can find you on social media.
On Twitter, find me at Nick the Kid Rice. You can get all the latest tweets that you thought you wanted, you thought you didn't. Nick the Kid Rice, all things sports. Unfortunately, a little less this year, talking-wise, than previous years, but you can find me on there.
Yeah, we do hope to get some more content, both of us really, down the road working in sports. I think the light is at the end of the tunnel, and I've had to say that a lot lately, and hopefully soon we're not talking about the tunnel anymore, and we're just talking about the light. Go ahead and give us feedback on the show at Phil Talk Sports on Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give a thumbs up to the episode if you liked it, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. After that, guys, just want to say thank you for tuning in. That is Nick. I am Phil, and we will see you next time. Thanks.